Morning guys, Dave Canterbury at the Pathfinder School, out here at the base camp area of the Pathfinder School. I just kind of cleaned up this fire pit and dug it back out. It hasn't been used much this summer. This is more of a wintertime camp, but it could be used in the summer just as easy. Plenty big and airy for that. I just haven't had a chance to use it much, so I thought what I'd do is come out here today and revamp a few things. You know, the beauty of bushcraft is, and the lure of bushcraft is being able to do things with what's around you with very simple kit items to help you make sustainable items that will further comfort you and make things easier. And one of those things that is very easy to make are different types of cooking systems to cook in the bush. And we've got a large fire pit here with a keyhole in front of it where we can pull coals in to cook over the top. We have a fire reflector built on the back of this thing that's covered with earth on the back side to further insulate it. And then we need to set ourselves up some simple cooking devices along with this to make it easier for us to cook here in the bush or at our personal space or our personal shelter, or whatever the case may be. So I'm going to show you a couple real quick pot suspension systems and cook systems that you can use that will help make your life a little bit easier, but you can make all of this stuff with natural material. We'll use bank line for our cordages, but you could use natural cordage if you needed to in a pinch. The thing is a lot of these things are going to keep you from having to carry metal objects. Now you might want to carry a small metal grate of some kind. Just a shelf out of a refrigerator from a junkyard works really good for that. You'll usually sit flat in the back of your pack somewhere where it's not really an inconvenience. They probably weigh less than a pound, but you can lay something like that over the top of this keyhole right here, maybe a couple logs across it, pull coals into that keyhole, and then you can cook on top of that grate. And that makes a really good system without carrying a whole bunch of stuff. And then all of your pot suspension systems and things like that can all be made out of sticks. Your tripods, your hooks, all those things can be made of sticks. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Stay with me, guys. Okay, so I've got myself 3 sticks of equal length, taller than myself. They're about 6.5 feet long. Not sure exactly what wood they are. Really doesn't matter as long as they're good hardwood and they're green. One of them is obviously oak. The other 2 are probably maple. But they're good and green, and that's what counts. So I cut those down. I've got them laying over my backstop, and I'm going to use that to lash my tripod. So I'll go ahead and get a close-up. I've done lashings before on tripods and things like that, but I'm going to go ahead and lash this tripod on video so you guys can see that one more time. Now the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with what's called a timber hitch. And there's complicated ways to tie a timber hitch, but the easiest thing to do is just to take yourself about a 4-inch lead on that bank line, a bite in that bank line, and just twist it over 4 or 5 times, just like this. And again, this is where this bank line really shines, is that it bites against itself really well. And then you just take that and wrap it over, put the whole line through that loop as if you were making like a noose of a snare or something like that, and pull all of that cordage straight through there. And what's going to happen when you're done doing that is it's going to bind on itself really well. You can see I can't pull that undone. So that gives me my initial timber hitch knot. And then I'll just lay that tag in there where I'm going to wrap anyway. And I want these to be pretty tight. So these initial wraps, I want them to be pretty good and secure. So I'll wrap a couple of times on here, maybe 3 wraps, and I'll pull it pretty hard with my hand as I go. But when I get to that 3rd wrap, I want to toggle to pull on. Now I use my knife for that because this knife just happens to have this little handy package carrier on it that works real good. Just wrap it 3 or 4 times and you can really give that stuff a good tight yank. Now you don't want to let those roll over and come together when you do that. You want to keep it as even and neat as you can. It'll last a lot longer for you in the end that way. And they're trying to spread out on me on the other end, but that's okay. I want to keep that just as flat as I can, but as tight as I can get it without letting it roll. Okay? And once I've done that, then I'm going to go ahead and take this wrapping off my hook and set it aside. And I'm going to wrap 3 more wraps around that, keeping those pretty even and pretty tight. So that I'll have, when I'm done, I'll have 6 wraps on here. And if you got a big long tag and you're trying to follow that around, it's kind of a pain. Better off you can bundle that cordage up a little bit. And then on that last one, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to wrap it around my T-handle a few times and just give it a good yank. Again, I got to make sure that that stuff doesn't bundle up on me. Okay. Now that I've got those 6 wraps on there, now I'm going to do what's called my frapping, which means I'm going to wrap in between those lines. I'm going to step down in the fire pit here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come around and come up through, and I'll just kind of spread this out for a minute to come up through it. Then I'm going to tuck this back down in here, just like this. Nice and tight. Pull on it. I'm going to come around that whole lash, just like this. And I'm going to do that 6 times as well. So there's 2. And when I get to the 3rd one again, when I get to that 3rd wrap around, back to that toggle again for a good yank, get that frapping really nice and tight, and then I'll wrap 3 more in. And you can see it's pulling together just a little bit right now. That's not going to hurt anything. If it was bunched up in a big wad, then I'd worry more about it. Okay, so this should be my 6th wrap right here. And again, every 3, I'm back to this toggle again, wrapping it up and pulling tight, just like that. And they come off of this pretty easy. That's why I like to use it. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come under this other one, the center one, spread this out just a little bit to get it in there, just like that. And then I'm going to put 6 wraps on this last one. And these are going to be a little tougher to get in there because it's starting to get really tight now. So I may have to turn it on its side a little bit like that, which is no big deal, to pull those wraps in. Okay, so that's going to give us a tripod that all we have to do is spread that thing out. And when you spread this out, those lashings are going to tighten up on themselves. So when I spread this tripod out, it's going to force those lashings tight, just like that. And what you really want when you make a tripod like this is you want something that you can spread that tripod out and lean your body weight on it, and it's not going to break. That's a good tripod. This stick's a little bit weak compared to the other 2, but it will work just fine. Now I've got this line hanging down in here, and there's a reason I left that there. Okay, so now we've got our piece of string hanging down in the middle of our tripod. Now, I'm a big fan of toggles and notches. If you understand simple lashings, toggles and notches, you can get away with a ton in bushcraft. So I've got just a toggle, just a stick, probably a 1/4 inch diameter. It's got a notch in the middle. It's just rounded off on both ends. And I just took my knife and pushed it in, popped it out, turned around, pushed it in, popped it out, made a V-notch. That's going to go about the level of where I would want a pot to hang if it were straight over the fire. So I'm going to take my line I've got left hanging down there, and I'm going to wrap it around once, and I'm going to half hitch it on one side, and then I'm going to come around the other side and half hitch it to create that clove hitch style knot in there, just like that. That's not going to slip. Now if I hang that down, let me move this camera a little bit for you guys. Now if that's hanging down, I can put a pot on that, or I can put a hook on that. I've just cut this piece out of a tree, and this is going to be my multifunctional pot hook. And I want to be able to use this in different places. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take another piece of this bank line. I'm going to cut a couple notches again. I'm going to notch this piece of wood. Very simple. I'm just going to score a line around it by putting my thumb to the outside and twisting the piece of wood just like this to score a line. Then I'm going to come back up and pop that notch out all the way around, just like that. Pushing out with my thumb, keeping it under control. Good knife safety is key. It's probably the biggest injury we get in the basic classes are self-induced knife injuries. Keeping that away from my body. Okay, so once I've notched that, I've just tied a bowline knot on the end of that cord that was big enough to go through the loop. I made that loop big enough I could pull the knot all the way through it, and that becomes my hook. Now all I'm going to do on this end is just tie another bowline, and that is going to go on my toggle. Okay, so once I've got that second bowline knot tied on here, now I can take this toggle and just run it through here, and it's going to hold that hook. If I want to use that hook for something else, it's real easy to get off of there. Okay, so once I've got that toggle tied in there, I can cut this cord a little bit. And what I do is I'll just cut off enough that I've got enough of tail there just to tie a knot in. And I'll use that for something else, but I'll just tie a knot in this tail, and that's just going to keep it, if it does start to slip through that clove hitch a little bit, the knot will stop it from going any further. That's not a necessary thing, it's just something I do when I'm setting something up like this. Now, the width or the length of this toggle is really going to dictate what you can hang over this fire if you're just going to use the toggle. What I mean by that is, if I have a pot the size of this one that I can put this toggle through, and it's long enough that it won't slip through the bail, then I can hang my pot completely off of that toggle and not worry about it. So if I had a bigger pot, like let's say this one, then I'm going to have a bigger toggle, because that thing will probably eventually, something will happen, it'll slip off there, and you're going to end up with your pot in the fire. So you're going to want this thing, you know, a few inches longer, so there's no way that could happen. Now if you wanted to, you could just use a hook. And if we take our hook that we made that's got our loop on the end of it, we can just put that right through our toggle, just like this, and it's not going to come off of there. Then we can hang our bigger pot from that hook, and our adjustment comes from the top. We have plenty of line up here that we can just take and go over this tripod. 1, 2, however many wraps we need to get that pot the height we want it off the fire. And it's not going to be a big deal. And with that hook, it's not going to come off of there. So I can use either option. They'll both work. One's a little bit more work than the other one, but they both work fine. So I'm just trying to show you some different options that you can do with a tripod to hang a pot over a fire. Okay, for this setup, I'm going to make a stake. Basically, I've just sharpened one end. I've cut a notch in on this end. You could cut that in with a saw off your multi-tool, or you could just work it in with your knife. And then I'm just cutting back into that notch, just like this. To make sure I've got a fairly deep notch there. That's kind of a 3/4 notch. It kind of goes 3/4 of the way around the wood. And once we get that, all we're going to do is we're going to create a loop from one of our spare pieces of bank line for that. And we're going to, again, we're just going to take it and lash it on there a couple times. Get us a good clove hitch on there with a bowline on this end that's big enough to go around another stick. And I'll show you what we're going to use that for in just a minute. Okay, so let me show you real quickly a real easy way to tie a clove hitch type knot with a security knot. Is what I usually use. What you're going to do is you're going to take 2 wraps around the object that you want to wrap up, and you've got an X right there when you do that. When you bring that second loop around, what you're going to do is you're going to take that tag end and you're going to put it right through the middle of that X, just like this. So you've got an X right there, and that line's going through it. When you pull that up tight, it's going to create that clove hitch knot, and it's not going to come undone very easy, especially with this bank line. It's going to be a pretty tight, self-tightening knot. If you want to put a knot in this end right here in this tag just to keep it from slipping, A security knot, when it gets into here, it's going to bite and there's no way that's going to slip unless you put a lot of pressure on it. And then I like to pull that knot around just to the side a little bit, just like that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to tie another loop in this end, and that could be an overhand knot, or if you want to get it out easy, it could be a bowline knot. Okay, so now I've taken a longer stick and I've just cut a notch in it. And basically I've just put 2 saw blades in there. I've sawed it once, twice, about 1/4 inch apart. Use my saw blade to pop that out of there and give myself a good wide notch in there for my pot to sit in. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to come to the back side of our backstop and hang this over the top. And we could use a fork right here. If we didn't have this backstop, we could put a fork in the ground right here. Get that right in our notch just like we want it, just like that. Now we can take this other stake and all we're going to do is attach it here and pound it in at an angle. And that's going to adjust the height of our pot depending on where we put that on the stake. So if we pound that stake in at a 45-degree angle so it's not going to come out, then we can put this anywhere we want to. Now bear in mind that we don't have any liquid in that pot, so there's not much weight there to counterbalance it. So right now the weight's mostly to the back, but if we had weight in that pot, it would be pulling down on this and levering down. Okay, so let's talk about a fork stick now. If we put a fork stick in the ground here and we use our notch stick to move it forward, obviously if we've got weight in there, it's going to counterbalance this. So that's where our stake comes in with our loop on it. Before we put that over the fire, what we're going to do is we're going to put our stake in the ground right here at an angle. Again, an angle backwards. And I've left myself enough slack that I can adjust this rope around the stake if I need to. So now I can push this out, put it here, and it's going to hold that pot where I want it. And I can adjust in and out on this rope to get it lower to the fire or further away from the fire, depending on where I need to have it to get the proper cook temperature. Okay, real quick, we cut this keyhole out. We did that so we could take this cheap refrigerator shelf. You can get these from scrap yards for nothing almost. Lay that thing right over top of that, pull our hot coals in there, and that gives us the ability to pan fry at that point very easily and control the heat. This thing doesn't hardly weigh anything. You can put this in the back of your pack. Fits really good in the Duluth Bushcraft pack right behind that garbage can. Sits right down beside that, no problem. Or in the front of it. It's almost exactly the same height, that's why I chose it. But it gives me the ability at that point now to raise my food up off the fire to cook with a pan very, very easily. If I'm using a regular fire, I can just put a couple sticks on the ground and set this on top of it above the fire. It's a really, really good option for you to think about carrying in your longer term stuff, or if you're going to be out bushcrafting and camping quite a bit. I really like it. So between this and the tripod and the suspension system for the pots, you can put a couple different pots on the fire, a pan on the fire, and you can do a lot of cooking really quick with a really simple system just like this. Guys, I really appreciate you joining me out here for another video today at the Pathfinder School. I appreciate everything you do for me, for my school, for my family, for all my friends, affiliates, and sponsors. I'll be back with another video as soon as I can. Thanks, guys.